Hello everyone, my name is Florence Denens-Habeck, PrimeVigilance Head of Marketing, and I'm pleased to welcome you today as your host. Firstly, I'd like to share a couple of words about PrimeVigilance. PrimeVigilance is an Aggregate company and an industry-leading specialist full-service drug safety provider, delivering worldwide solutions for clinical trial safety and post-marketing pharmacovigilance and medical information. We are glad you could join us today for our Pharmacovigilance Advanced Learning webinar series. Today's webinar is titled Aggregate Report Guidance. This new webinar aims for our expert to present, guide, and help our listener to gain the knowledge and support in the preparation of aggregate report throughout the life cycle of a medicinal product. Before we commence, I'd like to run through a couple of quick housekeeping matters. Firstly, we expect this webinar presentation to run for approximately 40 to 45 minutes, with a short amount of time for question and answer at the end. And secondly, we would like to welcome our listener to send us questions at any point throughout the presentation. You can do so by typing them into the Q&A section available on your screen. And now I'm pleased to introduce you to our expert speaker, Dr. Viera Bilucic-Bundac, PrimeVigilance Director of Medical Writing. Viera has over 20 years of experience in scientific pharmaceutical research, pharmacovigilance, regulatory affairs, and quality. She spent the last decade in managerial and directorial role in both the pharma industry and pharma service provider. Dr. Yana Donchikova, PrimeVigilance Strategic Advisor. Yana has over 14 years of experience in pharmacovigilance, mainly in preparation of periodic safety report and signal detection. She has worked with several global pharmaceutical companies as well as service providers. I will now let our first speaker take over.
Thank you, Flo. Let us begin with defining the term of aggregate reports. Term aggregate reports refers to different types of reports that differ in format and timelines predicted for their submission, but all of them have a common goal, which is ensuring safety of an investigated molecule in both pre-marketing as well as post-marketing stage. Aggregate reports provide a structured format, and their submission periodicity is a defined process which enables continuous monitoring of safety of investigated drugs. Furthermore, data analyzed in aggregate reports represents cumulative safety information from various sources, which enables a constant regulatory overview of the safety profile and risk-benefit of medicinal product throughout its life cycle. Aggregate reports are submitted to regulatory authorities according to defined periodicity, depending on type of report and active substance or combination of active substances, as well as national and regional requirements in force. Assessment of aggregate reports by competent regulatory authorities can determine if further investigations on specific safety issues are needed, or if an additional action is necessary to protect public health, such as an update of the information provided to healthcare professionals and patients, additional educational materials for healthcare professionals and patients, or similar actions. What are the types of aggregate reports? In pre-approval stage, aggregate safety reports are submitted for molecules under clinical development. Development safety update reports, so-called DSURs, are common standard for periodic reporting on drugs under development among ICH regions. Please note that this also includes marketed drugs that are under further study, that is, medicinal products that have been already granted a marketing authorization. US and EU regulators consider that the DSUR, when submitted in annual frequency, meets national and regional requirements met by the US Investigational New Drug Annual Report and the EU Annual Safety Report. Therefore, the format of EU Annual Safety Report is no longer accepted in EU. Investigational New Drug Annual Report is still accepted in US, but being more and more replaced by DSUR. In post-approval stage, various types of reports are submitted for medicinal products that have been granted marketing authorization. Commonly, we use Periodic Benefit Risk Evaluation Report, so-called PBRER, that is Periodic Safety Update Report, so-called PSUR, while in US format of Periodic Adverse Drug Experience Report, that is Periodic Adverse Experience Report, is used. For renewal purposes in EU, additional clinical safety data in regard to data already presented in registered medicinal product dossier are presented in form of addendum to clinical overview. In the EU, companies must submit risk management plan, RMP, as part of medicinal product dossier at the time of application for a marketing authorization. RMPs include information on safety profile of medicinal product, method by which risks will be prevented or minimized when medicinal product is used by patients, plans for studies and other activities involving safety and efficacy of the medicinal product, as well as the measuring of the effectiveness of risk minimalization measures. RMPs can only be submitted at the same time as the periodic safety update report if the change in the RMP comes as a consequence of the PSUR. RMP is a living document that is continuously updated throughout the life cycle of medicinal product as new information becomes available. So this presentation is not going to focus on specificities of RMPs, but on standard aggregate reports used in timely intervals in pre-approval and post-approval stage of a drug. As stated before, Development Safety Update Report is a common standard for periodic reporting on drugs under development among ICH regions. DSUR format enable alignment in regions of content and timing of safety overview of drugs under development. The main objective of DSUR is to present comprehensive annual review and evaluation of safety information collected during the reporting period related to a drug under investigation. DSUR is submitted regardless of drug marketing status, that is, regardless if the molecule is still under pre-marketing clinical study stage, or if molecule has been developed to medicinal product that has been granted the marketing authorization, but is still a subject of additional studies. The main focus of the DSUR is data and findings from interventional clinical trials of drugs and biologicals that are under investigation. Because clinical development of a drug frequently continues following marketing approval, relevant information from post-marketing studies should be also included into DSUR. DSUR should provide safety information from all ongoing clinical trials and other studies that the sponsor is conducting or has completed during the review period, which includes clinical trials using an investigational drug, mostly studies in phase 1 to 3, clinical trials conducted using marketing drugs in approved indications, mostly studies in phase 4, therapeutic use of an investigational drug such as expanded access programs, compassionate use programs, particular patient use programs, and similar, and also clinical trials conducted to support changes in the manufacturing process of medicinal product. Period covered by DSUR is determined by period between development international birth date and data log point. Development international birth date is the date of issuance of sponsor's first authorization to conduct a clinical trial in any country worldwide. The data log point of the DSUR should be the last day of the 1-year reporting period. The DSUR should be submitted to all concerned regulatory authorities no later than 60 calendar days after the DSUR data log point. DSUR is submitted to drug regulatory authorities in annual periodicity, as long as indicated by national or regional laws. When submission is no longer required, the sponsor should indicate that the final DSUR serves as the last annual report for the investigational drug in that country or region. The sponsor should also indicate whether or not clinical trials are continuing elsewhere. Periodic Safety Update Report, PSUR, is another type of aggregate report used to provide an evaluation of the risk-benefit balance of medicinal product during the post-authorization phase. Each marketing authorization holder is responsible for submitting PSURs for its own products and should submit PSURs to the drug regulatory agencies within defined timelines. For generics, well-established use, homeopathic and traditional herbal medicinal products, PSURs is not submitted routinely, but are submitted only in cases where there is a condition in the marketing authorization, or when requested by a competent authority, or due to the lack of PSURs for an active substance after its authorization. The PSUR is assessed by competent authorities, and in its content, it should focus on summary information, scientific safety assessment, and integrated risk-benefit evaluation, but it should be noted that detailed listings of individual cases shall not be included systematically. The PSUR should present an integrated safety overview rather than just listing of the cases which were already reported. The analysis of risk-benefit balance should include an evaluation of the safety, efficacy, and effectiveness data, and is to be performed for all authorized indications, but it should also include all possible uses of the medicinal product, including off-label use. Marketing authorization holders for products which were authorized before 2nd July 2012 for CP products and 21st July 2012 for nationally authorized products shall submit PSURs at 6 months intervals once the product is authorized, even if this product is not marketed. Once the product is marketed, 6 monthly PSUR submissions should be continued following initial placing on the market in the EU for 2 years, then once a year for the following 2 years, and thereafter at intervals of 3 years. This frequency may differ for PSURs who are laid down as a condition to the marketing authorization or for which periodicity is determined otherwise in the list of union reference dates. The timelines for submission of PSUR to competent authorities in concerned territories differ based on length of period requested by DSUR and depending if the submission is an ad hoc regulatory request. For PSURs which are covering intervals up to 12 months, including intervals of exactly 12 months, PSUR should be submitted within 70 calendar days of the data log point. For PSURs covering intervals longer than 12 months, PSUR should be submitted within 90 calendar days of the data log point. The timeline for the submission of ad hoc PSURs requested by competent authorities would normally be specified in the request. Otherwise, the ad hoc PSURs should be submitted within 90 calendar days of the data log point. As anyone dealing with aggregate reports may notice, there are 2 terms being used for post-marketing safety reports, one being Periodic Safety Update Report, PSUR, and another being Periodic Benefit Risk Evaluation Report, PBRER. So what is the difference? The ICH guideline E2C on clinical safety data management introduced the term PSUR to define a report focusing on new safety information in the context of patient exposure. The goal defined was to determine if changes were needed to the reference safety information in order to optimize the continued safe use of the product. And this guideline was revised in 2003 to provide further clarification. ICH Guideline E2C-R2 from 2012 introduced term PBRER. This term was used to give greater emphasis on benefit than the PSUR, focusing on extensive evaluation of benefit risk. Consequently, the name of this proposed report was Periodic Benefit Risk Evaluation Report. However, although the required format and content of the PSURs in EU are based on those of the Periodic Benefit Risk Evaluation Report described in the ICH E2C guideline, in EU regulation GVP modules, the report is described under term PSUR. Therefore, the scope, objectives, format, and content of PSUR in GVP modules are based on those of PBRER, but the term PSUR remained. What is the relation between DSUR and a PSUR? Well, the focus of the DSUR is on investigational drugs, while focus of PSUR is on registered medicinal products. But there can be an overlap between the content of the DSUR and PSUR, and some data are definitely to be presented in both reports. For example, information from marketing experience, which is reported in PSUR, might be relevant to clinical development and therefore will be reported in the DSUR. Safety findings from clinical trials conducted using marketed drugs would be included in the DSUR, but would also be important for post-marketing safety and therefore would be reported in the PSUR. But DSUR and PSUR are standalone documents as they focus on different subject matter and have differing periodicities and recipients. When clinical development of a drug continues in any country worldwide after a marketing approval has been granted, both a PSUR and a DSUR should be submitted as specified in national regulation. However, if it is aligned between marketing authorization holder and regulatory authority, DSUR can be prepared based on PSUR international birth date so that the DSUR and PSUR can be synchronized. In synchronizing the data log points for the DSUR and PSUR, the period covered by the next DSUR should be no longer than 1 year. European Medicinal Agency EMA made public a list of Union reference dates as obligation for periodicity of submission of PSUR in European Union. The objectives of the list are the harmonization of data log point and frequency of submission of PSURs for the same active substance and combination of active substances. As a result, same frequency is used. Also, optimization of the management of PSURs within the EU. As a result, single assessment is needed. The list enables the harmonization of PSUR submissions for medicinal products containing the same active substance or the same combination of active substances. The EU reference dates list should contain the information on reference dates, frequency of submission, data log points of the next submission, and date of publication on EU Medicines web portal. Any change to the dates of submission and frequency of PSUR specified in marketing authorization shall take effect 6 months after the date of such change. Where it is deemed necessary, the list should include the scope of the PSUR and related EU single assessment procedure with data such as if PSUR should cover all the indications, all formulations, and all routes of administration. Data whether generic, well-established use, traditional herbal, or homeopathic medicinal products shall submit PSUR. And let us remember that these type of medicinal products usually do not require submission of PSUR, so any deviation from this rule should be listed. This list of Union reference dates is a living document and can be amended when needed based on risk-benefit approach. Changes to the list may be applied for legitimate reasons, such as if new information becomes available that might have an impact on risk-benefit balance of active substance or combination of active substances, or any potential impact of public health. If there is any change in the criteria used for the allocation of frequency for PSUR submission, or if an active substance is newly authorized. Or additionally, if there is a legitimate legal request from a marketing authorization holders as defined under Directive 2001/83/AC of European Parliament and Council. The reasons may be reasons relating to public health or optimization of process in order to avoid the duplication of the assessment and in order to achieve international harmonization. Then the list will be amended accordingly when deemed appropriate by regulatory authority, and it will be published on the European Medicines web portal. The competent authorities in member states assess PSURs. For purely nationally authorized medicinal products, which are authorized in one member state, the assessment of PSUR is conducted by the competent authority in the member state where the product is authorized. For medicinal products authorized in more than one member state containing the same active substance or same combination of active substances, a single assessment of all PSURs is conducted with recommendation from the PRAC. The assessment is done simultaneously for the substance or combination of substances, regardless of the marketing authorization holder for the marketing products containing those substances. The outcome of the PSUR assessment results in legally binding decision to marketing authorization holders, and they are obliged to submit a variation or even suspend or revoke the marketing authorization of the medicinal products. Marketing authorization holders are obliged to incorporate the new safety warnings and key risk minimalization recommendations arising from the assessment of the PSUR in the relevant sections of their product information. However, it is very important to remember that harmonization of the entire product information in all the member states where the product is authorized is not one of the objectives of the PSUR assessment procedure. In case assessment of PSURs concerns only single centrally authorized medicinal product, this procedure entails several steps as defined on this scheme that you can see on a slide. First of all, the assessment of PSUR is coordinated by EMA and shall be conducted by a rapporteur appointed by the PRAC. First, upon receipt, EMA performs a technical validation of the report to ensure that this application is in suitable format. The procedure starts in accordance with the official starting dates and timetables defined by EMA. During the assessment, the PRAC rapporteur shall prepare assessment report and send it to EMA and to the members of the PRAC within 60 days of the start of the procedure. EMA will send the preliminary assessment report to the marketing authorization holder, and by date 90, the marketing authorization holder and members of the PRAC may say comments on this preliminary assessment report to both EMA and PRAC rapporteur. Following receipt of comments, the PRAC rapporteur shall prepare an updated assessment report within 15 days. This updated assessment report is made available to the members of the PRAC and should be forwarded to the marketing authorization holder by EMA. The PRAC would adopt the updated assessment report with or without any further changes at its next meeting, together with the recommendation whether a marketing authorization shall be maintained or suspended, or may be revoked, or if a variation should be submitted. PRAC recommendation assessment report is considered by Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use within 30 days of receipt, and an opinion is issued with timetable for implementation of decision. Further to adoption, EMA sends this opinion to the European Commission, marketing authorization holder, and competent authorities in member states. The final assessment conclusions and recommendations are available publicly because they are published on the European Medicines web portal. In other case, an assessment of PSURs concerns assessment of PSURs for medicinal products belonging to different marketing authorizations containing the same active substance. This can include a mixture of centrally authorized products, products authorized through MRP procedure, DCP procedure, or national procedure, which are assessed via so-called PSUR EU single assessment procedure. This assessment via EU single assessment procedure is conducted by either a member state, if none of these marketing authorizations which are concerned have been granted in accordance with the CP procedure, or by rapporteur, which is appointed by PRAC, where at least one of the marketing authorization concerns has been granted in accordance with the centralized procedure. The first steps we already discussed in a previous slide for assessments of PSURs, which concern only one single centrally authorized medicinal product, while final steps include the national steps. To explain further, upon a receipt of this decision from the European Commission, the competent authorities in member states shall take the necessary measures to maintain, vary, suspend, or even revoke the marketing authorization within 30 days timeline for this national phase. I will now hand it over to Jana.
Thank you, Vera. So now we are getting to another type of aggregate reports. These are periodic adverse drug experience reports and periodic adverse experience reports. So PAER or PAER. These are United States specific and aren't required by any other regulatory authorities than the US FDA. These reports are prepared in the post-marketing phase, and the legislation providing the background and requirements for these reports is the FDA Code of Federal Regulations, specifically Title 21. There are two sections relevant for post-marketing aggregate reporting within this title. Section 314.80 applies for drugs for human use. So these are the products approved via the NDA, new drug application. So this is the PAER, the drug experience. And then the other section is 680, and this applies for the biological products or biologics that are approved via the BLA or biologics license application. So then we drop the D from the title and it's just called the PAER, adverse experience report, not drug experience report. There is a difference in the name of these two types of reports, but the sections of the reports are pretty much the same. And the main difference is only in the details that need to be presented for each case for the drugs versus biologics. So the overall structure of the document is the same. The aim of these reports is to provide periodic evaluation of the safety profile and the benefit-risk profile from post-marketing experience. So this is similar to the PBRER we were talking about. But as I said, this is required by the FDA, so it's just region-specific. The reports are prepared from the date of approval of the application or date of issuance of the biologics license in case of biologics. And for the 3 first years, they are prepared every quarter, and then after those first 3 years, they are prepared every year. The quarterly reports need to be submitted within the 30 days of the data log point, and the annual reports within 60 days. Now for the content of these reports, they're relatively simpler compared to, for example, PSURs and PBRERs we mentioned earlier. They consist of 2 main parts, is the descriptive portion and a non-descriptive portion. The descriptive portion is the actual body of the aggregate report with its appendices, and then the non-descriptive portion consists of an XML output from the database, and this part is submitted separately from the descriptive portion. So as we said, for the descriptive portion, we have 30 days or 60 days from the data log point. The same timeline applies for the non-descriptive portion, but they don't have to be submitted at the same time. So any time between the data log point and submission deadline. So it can happen that the non-descriptive part is submitted earlier or slightly later, or some companies do it at the same time as they're submitting the descriptive part. And also the non-descriptive part the cases can be submitted in 1 or multiple batches. The descriptive portion of the PAER consists of the narrative summary and analysis of the 15-day alert report. So they're called 15-day reports, alert reports, or expedited reports. These are all synonym. These are serious and unexpected cases from worldwide sources, so both domestic, originating in the US, and foreign from outside of the US. And this is based on when these reports were submitted to the FDA. So cases that are submitted within the reporting interval. So this is important to note because it's not based on when the case was received, but when it was submitted to the FDA. Then analysis of non-expedited reports also used to be required, but this is no longer the case. But you might still come across it in some historic reports. Then second part of the descriptive portion consists of the narrative discussion of actions taken during the reporting interval, and this includes information and brief overview of the reference safety information, changes to the US labeling, overview of newly initiated studies, important foreign regulatory actions, and communication of new safety information. And then we have the third part of the descriptive portion, and this consists of the database outputs, or these are the line listings. Then the non-descriptive part, as I mentioned, is an XML output from the database, and this contains the non-expedited or non-alert or non-15-day cases. Again, these are used as synonyms, received in the reporting interval. And as I stressed before, for the 15-day cases, they are presented in the report based on the date when they were submitted. For the non-expedited reports, these are included based on the date that were received. So this is important to remember. In the past, this used to be submitted as MedWatch forms, but this is no longer required as the MedWatch forms are now replaced by the XML electronic file. So when the product is also approved for marketing in other territories, and the PSURs or PBRs are required for this product, the FDA may accept the PBR in place of a PAER or PAER, but this needs to be specifically requested by the MA holder from the FDA and needs to be acknowledged by the FDA. So this process is referred to as PBR waiver, and the FDA issued a guidance on how to apply for this waiver. This is the guidance for industry called Providing Post-Marketing Safety Reports in the ICH E2C format of Periodic Benefit Risk Evaluation Report. But even then, the US-specific information needs to still be included in the PBR. This is usually placed in the regional appendices, and this additional information consists of the non-expedited reports. So these are the non-alert, non-15 days, which are received during the reporting interval, submitted in the XML format electronically. Then list of all ICSR submitted during the reporting interval and their submission dates, and approved US labeling at the data log point, plus narrative of any changes to the labeling during the reporting interval. So generally, this is stated in the guidance that the FDA allows changes of the format. So from PAER or PAER, it can be changed to PSUR PBR. They allow change of the data log point to align with the PBRs. So if the marketing authorization holder already has PBR submitted, let's say in the EU, then the data log point of the US reports can be aligned. But this is only possible as long as there are no gaps in reporting periods. In general, they do not allow changes in reporting frequency. This might be possible within the first 3 years when the quarterly PAERs are submitted. So it depends on the product and on the circumstances. But however, later when the, for example, PBR or PSUR is on a 3-year frequency or longer frequency, they will still be expecting yearly PAERs in between the PSURs. So that's all about PAERs and PAERs, and we can now move to the next type, which is the addendum to the clinical overview, or ACO. Again, these documents are specific for the local legislation and are only required in the EU for the renewals of the marketing authorization. So the legislative background is provided in 2 guidance documents. It's the guideline on the processing of renewals in the centralized procedure and a CMDH best practice guide on the processing of renewals in the mutual recognition and decentralized procedures. So in general, in the EU, the initial marketing authorizations is valid for 5 years after it is first granted, unless it is a conditional marketing authorization or marketing authorization granted in exceptional circumstances. These follow slightly different rules. And after the 5-year period, the MA needs to be renewed. So during this process, the whole renewal dossier is submitted, and The addendum to the clinical overview is one part of this dossier. So it's placed in module 2.5. And then it needs to be also accompanied by clinical expert statement and information about the expert, which are placed in module 1.4.3. The aim of this report is to provide a conclusion on whether the marketing authorization can be safely renewed for an unlimited period or as applicable based on the data. So usually there is this first 5-year period, then renewal, and with most products, then the marketing authorization will be given for unlimited period. But in exceptional circumstances, this can be another 5-year period, etc. The ACO should therefore provide a critical discussion addressing the benefit-risk balance for the product at the time of the renewal. This is on the basis of the PSURs or PBRER submitted safety efficacy data accumulated since the granting of the marketing authorization or since the last renewal. And it should be making reference to relevant new information in the public domain. The renewal procedure can be also shortened and simplified for certain types of medicinal products, and an abbreviated ACO can be prepared. This applies to medicinal products approved according to Article 10.1 in the EU member states, so these are the generics, and then certain elements of the ACO can also be omitted for products which are authorized under Article 10A, so this is the well-established use, unless there is an obligation to submit PBRs for this product. So content and format of the ACO are very similar to the PBRER or PSUR, and it is actually recommended in the guidance documents on renewals that the GVP Module 7 for PSUR should be used as a guidance when preparing the ACO. Some sections are not necessary, for example, the non-clinical section, but on the other hand, there is some additional information that is needed, such as the history of pharmacovigilance system inspection. So this is routinely not included in PBRs. What is also different to a standard PBRER or PSUR is that the new data that have been acquired since the data log point of the last PSUR up to the data log point of the renewal should be highlighted. When it comes to the planning and timelines for the ACO, it is important to remember that the renewal application must be submitted at least 9 months before the marketing authorization expiry date. So if the marketing authorization is expiring after 5 years, then from this it is clear that the ACO will not cover the whole period of 5 years, but need to be ready to be submitted 9 months before the 5-year period expires. And the guideline also specifically states that any application in the submission of the renewal application by more than 2 months, so earlier than 11 months before the marketing authorization expiry, will not be accepted by the agency. So it's important to plan where the marketing authorization is expiring and when the data log point of the report should be, so that all these timelines can be met. And then the renewal application on the EU side, when it is assessed by the PRAC and CHMP, can take up to 120 days, and decision-making process for the renewal is 67 days. So this all needs to be completed before the 5-year period is up. So, and that is all for the ACO and all from me, and I will now hand over back to Florence.
Thank you very much, Viera and Jana, for a very helpful and instructive presentation. We have received a few questions to answer. Let's try to answer a couple of them now. Our first question will be, is it necessary to submit a PAER if there were no cases in the reporting period? Who would like to answer this question?
I'm happy to answer that, Flo. Thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. We have seen different approaches, but basically these type of reports, the US PAER and PAER, are based on the cases that were received in the period or submitted in the period. So when there are no cases, there is basically no need to prepare the whole report because it would be empty anyway, and there is nothing for the non-descriptive part to submit. So we have seen from our experience that a simple cover letter where this is all stated, that which product and what is the reporting period and all the other information can be put in this cover letter and simply submitted to the FDA, stating there are no cases from the reporting period. Yeah, but you cannot completely not submit anything because that would be considered as non-compliance.
Thank you, Jana. Unfortunately, it seems we just have time for one more question for our expert. It is, if our product is registered in several EU countries, do I need to submit a PSUR to each national authority separately? And they will align among themselves? Who would like to answer?
Hi, Flo. I can take that question. Well, actually, this is also a good question, but the short answer would be no, because in EU, all PSURs are submitted online via PSUR repository. There is this e-submission gateway, which is available online. Every marketing authorization holder should register themselves and get the access to this platform. And PSURs is then submitted once, and it is distributed online to all applicable recipients, meaning all national regulatory authorities, and this is done regardless of the procedure for registration for this medicinal product. So we are talking about national MRP, DCP, and CP products. There is, though, one exception for the rule. According to this article 58, it is EU medicines scheme called EU M for All, and it is intended for markets outside of European Union, but also only for those medicinal products that are target of an unmet medical need or those who are of major public health interest. They are exception to this rule, and for their safety, there's evaluation on case-to-case basis, and this does not apply. But otherwise, for all other medicines, PSUR repository should be used.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you very much, Vera and Jana. Unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today. We want to answer everyone who has taken the time to ask a question, and so we will take the time to reply by email to all outstanding questions soon after. This concludes our webinar session for today. We would like to thank everyone once again for joining us. We hope you find the webinar helpful, and we are looking forward to receiving your feedback. To remind you, this webinar will soon be available to watch again from the PrimeVigilance website section and promoted on our social media profile. This concludes our webinar session for today. Thank you very much for listening, and until next time.